Welcome back, everyone, to Articulating with David Barnett. My name is Sharon Locher, and this is episode 14. And with me, as always, is the man himself,
David Barnett.
And today, we've decided to do something new. As you know, we've interviewed several artists that the gallery represents. I thought it might be fun to switch things up a bit for this episode and interview David about his artwork. I know we've discussed you being a gallery owner and how you started the business, but we've never really delved into your life and work as an artist.
So I thought of myself as an artist from age 6 on. And so even in kindergarten, I thought of myself as an artist. And I was very fortunate to have a fantastic art teacher named Sylvia Spicuzza,
Yes.
whose father was a prominent artist in Milwaukee, Francesco Spicuzza.
Mm-hmm.
And I had Sylvia for my art teacher from kindergarten through 6th grade at Lake Bluff Grade School in Shorewood. And it really encouraged me, and she thought I had some talent.
So she was the first one that saw something in you and kind of nurtured
Yes.
your creativity, and which is wonderful. And of course, her being the daughter of a very prominent Midwestern artist too, who the gallery also has.
Yeah.
We have several of both of their works.
Yes.
So that's kind of nice, that kind of way it's come around full circle. Another thing that I've always been curious about, I know we've talked about it a little bit just in our own conversations, who are some of your artistic influences?
The first influence on me was a New York artist named Saul Steinberg. And Saul Steinberg did a lot of drawings and watercolors and mixed media pieces for the New Yorker magazine. And my father read the New Yorker. It was a weekly magazine, and he read that every week from the time I was born. And so I would look at I couldn't read as a 2-year-old, but I was born with a visual brain. So I always looked through the magazines and looked at the drawings and the artworks in there. And so Saul Steinberg was probably, I would say, the very first influence on me. I actually met Saul Steinberg when I was in my mid-20s in New York and in East Hampton, Long Island, at a 4th of July picnic.
Oh, that's right. You told me this story.
Yeah, and he was sitting on the lawn and with his picnic basket and his bottle of wine, and I went up to him and almost like he was godlike, And I said, told him the story about the New York magazine, and his response was, "Get lost, kid." So sometimes you have to separate the art from the artist.
Absolutely. I think we've all done this at some point with anyone I think we've admired. We kind of put them on this pedestal and they become, larger than life. And it's, I think, good to remember that they are absolutely human and their personalities may not always, be what we had hoped for upon meeting them, but it still makes for a good story. And as I mentioned before, obviously, we have discussed the gallery and how that got started on previous episodes. How long was it before you began to show your own artwork? Was that something that you did right away when you opened the gallery doors, or was that something that took some time?
I was in the art business for 30 years before I had enough courage to present my own work. And what really got me started was a client kept asking me about my work. She said, "Well, you're an artist. Where's your work?" And so I kept putting her off. And after her 4th request, I thought, okay, I better get this over with. So I pulled up my college portfolio, and I got out 3 9x12 watercolors and framed them up and showed them to her. And she bought 3 pieces for $250 each, I believe, framed. The frames cost me $200 each, so I valued my work at $50 a piece. So that's how I kind of got started. I said, okay, now I'm a professional artist.
Yeah, well, that's not too bad. I mean, selling 3 pieces right off the bat, that's a pretty good experience.
It was encouraging.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It gave me some self-confidence because I really didn't have much self-confidence in my own work to present it because I'm selling Picassos and Matisses and Toulouse-Lautrecs and Kandinskis and all these important artists. I thought, well, who's going to want a David Barnett? I'm a nobody artist. But it's turned out that over all the years, people do like my work.
They do.
And they collect it, and so we've got now collectors all over the world.
Yeah, I was going to say, in my time here, we sold several of your pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, now you've been creating for quite some time, and so there's a lot of varied works. I know you have worked in a variety of mediums over the years. It seems like you've settled primarily on watercolors as your main.
That's my favorite medium.
Yeah, what is it about watercolors?
I like the spontaneity and the fluidity of it. It's interesting because most artists, when you ask them about watercolor, they say, oh, they're afraid of watercolors. It's too difficult to do.
I would agree with that.
Because you can't really hide. Once you put it down, it's there.
Yeah, you can't really
It's
fix.
more difficult to hide if you perceive something as a mistake. But I don't. In my painting technique and style, if I do something that somebody might perceive as a mistake, even if myself, it's just part of the work, and that doesn't bother me.
That's a good attitude, I think, for approaching it. Because I think especially for any creative types, I'm obviously not an artist myself. In college, studying art history, obviously I had to take some studio art classes, and so I dabbled a little bit in it. I found watercolors to be very difficult to wield in terms of all the different mediums, just for the reasons that you shared. And so for you to just accept, if there is something along the way that, okay, this isn't exactly what I wanted to be doing or the direction I wanted to go, something that may be perceived as a mistake, so to speak, that you just kind of accept it. This is part of the process. This is part of the overall piece, and it just is what it is. It's kind of a very cool Zen approach to painting. I like that.
Go with the flow.
Yeah, because I think a lot of artists, and like I said, creatives in general, we tend to be very difficult on ourselves, and we have a very clear idea of this is what I want to do, this is what I want to create, and so to be able to deviate from that and just say, okay, this is what it is very cool. I need to do more of that myself with my writing and my research.
All right, we can work on that.
All right, excellent. Well, as everyone can see, we have several of David's pieces here. I know one thing that you've done that a lot of artists do as well is that many of the works that have comprised overall series. So I'm guessing, when you do create a group of works that are part of a series, like a group of paintings, for example, what is it about a subject matter or a theme that drives you to want to address that multiple times?
So for me, what moves me is the creative process in general, and of course, the other part is my imagination.
Sure.
I have kind of a wild, crazy imagination, and so I often paint to music, and that inspires me. I interpret the music visually, and plus, if I make a note or a little sketch of what I want to paint, I do. It's a with the way my brain operates. I got mostly a right brain. I'm all visual. I interpret things visually.
Mm-hmm.
Words as well. So that's kind of where it all comes from. And so now that I'm 78, I have over 22 different series that I've worked on. I always tell the artists when they ask me, what should I paint? What should I do? How do I do this? I say, well, you have to trust yourself and not worry about selling anything or painting for somebody else. You have to paint for yourself, what comes from within you.
That is very
and
true.
Express that. There was an artist, Lester Johnson, who was the chairman of the Yale University Art and Architecture Department, and he showed in New York first abstract expressionist things in the 50s, and then he was one of the first New York artists to shift to figurative painting. And he called me one day from Greenwich, Connecticut. He was very upset and depressed. His works weren't selling well in New York at the time. And he said, tell me what to paint. What's going to sell? And I said, well, Lester, just don't worry about that. Just paint from what comes from within.
Mm-hmm.
Be true to yourself. Don't worry about it. Yeah. So I do tell the artists that if you want to have some notoriety with your work and get somewhere, you have to do work that's unique to yourself, to your own vision. Don't copy somebody else's work. Now, of course, that said, all artists, for the most part, are influenced by other artists around them and from
Sure.
the past. But at the same time, the goal is to have your own vision and your own style, so that if you look in a museum, you don't have to go up and read a signature on the artist, to read the artist's name, to know who painted it. You know from their style, from
That is
a
very
long
true as
distance away.
well. Yeah.
And so, for example, with my Garden Panorama series, of which we have one example here, this piece here,
Yes.
the Spirit Garden, I tell the artists, you have to, paint, in this case, flowers in a way that identifies it as your work. I mean, there's millions of artists that paint flowers, right? But how many of those artists can you recognize whose work it is without having to look at the signature?
That's a very good point.
Yeah, so that's what I recommend to the artists, and I live by that myself.
Yeah.
So this particular piece is an unusual technique with watercolor. It's wet on wet.
Yes.
So, which is the most difficult watercolor technique to do, because you wet the paper first, and then when you put the watercolor on, it's going to run and bleed.
Mm-hmm.
And so the trick is to have it stop where you want it to, and that's very difficult to do. You have to have a lot of experience with it, and you have to have a little luck too. For
Oh,
that
absolutely. Because you really don't know, like, once you're putting that paint down, how far is this going to bleed, or
Yeah.
is
So
it
you
gonna-
want
what
to,
direction?
yeah, you don't want to lose the image.
Yes.
So I mean, in other words, you want to be able to recognize the flowers,
Mm-hmm.
but still have it get the style and the technique of very loose, kind of almost surreal. the way
Yes, it has a
it
surreal and slight impressionistic feel to it.
Yeah.
What I love about wet on wet, just in general, is what you just described, that bleeding effect, and kind of, the flowers are, you see the shape of the flower, and then it's also kind of leaving this lovely shadow behind it. And the colors in that piece too are just so beautiful. Whenever I see that painting, I just immediately think of springtime, when everything's just first in bloom and life is, is
Renewed.
abounding and renewed after a long, cold winter.
Yeah.
I know another series that you did is the Target series, and we have one of those right next to you here on the floor. We've done several of these. I thought we could talk a little bit about them because I know the subject matter is something that you feel very strongly about, and it also there's some personal history of yours here too.
Of the approximately 22 different series that I've worked on over the years, most of the work, as you can see, is rather playful and more lighthearted, but this particular series is the only, and no pun intended, but deadly serious series. And when I was 14 and my parents sent me up to Camp Manitowish in Bullard Junction, they said, okay, kids, you're going to learn how to shoot a gun. And so from 50 feet away in a prone position, I shot at the target and I hit the bullseye. So I thought that I would save that target, and I have the target in my studio. It's about 7 by 9 inches. And what I didn't realize at the time as a 14-year-old was that the NRA, the National Rifle Association, had sent out hundreds of thousands of these targets to every camp in the country to indoctrinate children to be gunslingers.
Yeah.
And so about 6 years ago, another mass shooting was so disturbing to me, I decided to start this series about anti-guns and anti-shooting, anti-violence. So you have the targets, but like you see a stop sign, like with a line through it, or different signs, like no entry or no this or no that. In this case, no shooting, no guns. And I use a lot of Native American imagery in this particular series because of the fact that what the white settlers and soldiers did to the Native Americans.
Yes.
Shooting them.
Yeah, shooting them, just the overall massacre of the indigenous people in America.
Yeah, and so that's...
they're really quite powerful. I remember when I first started working here and I saw these, I thought, oh, this is cool. And you started to tell me a little bit about the background and just how these were your actual targets, and it's filled in with your information and your age at the time, and I just thought, what an incredible statement, because here's something that you actually used as a kid, that was provided by the NRA. Like you said, they were trying to indoctrinate children into using rifles and becoming comfortable with guns at a young age. And of course, now we look where society has come with that, and how these mass shootings, I mean, there was just another one, I think, was it last week or earlier this week? Yeah, in Madison. It's become so commonplace that, half the time you can't even keep up with them. And so for you to have this kind of very unique experience as a child, and then to look back on it later on and realize, wow, this is incredibly disturbing, that this was happening, that the NRA was sending these to all the different camps in the country and trying to get children involved. Like I said, it's a very powerful statement, and again too, a very personal one. I think it's a really interesting and unique idea. And then you also kind of put a bit of that history in there too, from the Native American aspect, and of course white settlers coming in and basically more or less stealing their country from them and obliterating these people. There's a lot going on here and in this series overall.
Yeah, and I use a lot of rubber stamps in this series as well as some other series. and that goes back to the very beginning, where I mentioned I was influenced by Saul Steinberg because he'd used a lot of rubber stamps and seals and different things in his work.
Well, and plus the rubber stamps too. I know I had a lot of those when I was a kid, and so again, it kind of harkens back to that childhood and that playful aspect of when you're a kid, you play things like cowboys and Indians, or pretending to have a gun and this kind of thing, and then looking at that, as an adult, looking back at that kind of naive viewpoint. It's definitely pretty incredible. But, yeah, I've always liked those because, as you said, that is really kind of one of your few political pieces or series that you've done. The rest of your stuff is pretty playful and
Yes. Right.
Anyways, moving on. Let's get into something playful. How about we talk about Miami Crypto Man?
Yeah, so this series came as a result because when I was at the Basel Art Fair in Miami, I was wearing this aqua linen sport coat.
Yes.
And dozens of people came up to me over the course of a week and said, "Where did you get that?" And most people were wearing black at the art show. And so I kind of stood out in the crowd. And so people came up to me and said, "Well, I want to buy one of those jackets." I said, "Well, I have to see if they're available." But so when I got home, I checked and they were no longer available. So we ironed it and then photographed it and then made prints of it. And because originally I was going to buy like 30 or 40 of the sport coats and then paint on them because it's linen, just like you do a painting on canvas. But that wasn't available, so made all different sizes. So it has also influenced by Magritte, the famous Belgian surrealist, where he did the bowler hat with an apple in his face.
Yes.
But so I use a sand dollar, and that's where the name Miami Crypto Man comes from, because sand dollars is my version of a cryptocurrency. Yeah.
It is kind of fun. I love that it's kind of this, well, not kind of, it definitely is a mix of surrealism and Dada. Yeah, it has a combination of the two. Like you said, the Magritte, I think it's Son of Man. That's the one with the apple in front of the face. Little bit of that, and then you kind of see, the found objects too with the leaf. Well, which one would you like to discuss next?
Well, I guess we could discuss this one here.
Is this an earlier piece?
This is the earliest piece in the group that we're looking at today.
Okay.
This I did in high school. It's called Circus Sideshow with Flying Turtles.
And that's ink?
Purple ink.
Purple ink. Okay.
Yeah. I did
Again, this is definitely
1964.
surrealist, and I can see the Saul Steinberg influence as well.
Yeah. And I was influenced by surrealism and even Bartholomew and the Oblique.
I'm not familiar with that.
Dr. Seuss, thank you.
Oh, that's a Dr. Seuss?
Yeah, Dr. Seuss,
I've never heard of that one. Do you recall what some of these figures and little creatures were meant to be?
Just really, like here's a flying turtle here.
Yeah, I see the turtles.
There's another turtle here. And so, just...
You kind of have this figure in the center with these...
Yeah, like a
crazy eyes.
like a circus performer.
Oh, okay. I gotcha. And this kind of looks like an elephant head, but on a human body. And
yeah, wild imagination.
Yes, a lot of fun. I like the pants on this guy. The pants, and it looks like he's got some. They look like those Dutch wooden clog shoes.
Which I wore in a musical at Short High School.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Finian's Rainbow.
Ah, so you did some theater as well.
Yeah, not very well.
Quite the Renaissance man.
Now this piece here,
Yes, here, I can hold that up.
so there was a period, after, so when I started the gallery in 1966 at age 19, I stopped doing artwork when I left the university, when I left UWM. And I didn't do any paintings for 20 years because I was busy trying to get the gallery going. Well, in 1992, I went to Mexico City, and I was so inspired by the culture and the artists that I met there that when I came back, I started painting again. And this particular piece is a variant in the very first piece I did, influenced by my trip to Mexico City. It's based on an experience that I had in Mexico City, where I was in a cab on my
I
way
see the cab there.
to an artist studio in Mexico City. If any of you listeners have been there, it's a very crowded and polluted place. And there were, like, at the time, 4 million VW taxis, Beetle taxis.
Yeah, I've heard it's just packed with people and vehicles everywhere you go.
Yeah, and so we were in a cab, as I said, and the traffic was bad. It took 2 hours. We're on our way to get to an artist studio, and in the vehicle next to us was a young American woman, and she was on her way to wherever she went to work out. And so her radio was blasting, and she had her left leg out the driver's side window. And so I said to the person that I was on my way to the Miguel Castronero studio with, I said, "How do you say one leg up in Spanish?" And he said, "Un pata arriba," one leg up. And so I came back and I did this piece, a self-portrait of me with one leg up, lying on the ground, dying of the exhaust fumes from all the pollution from the cars. Yeah. So that's Mexico
What
City.
I'm wondering is how she was able to drive with one leg hanging out of the...
Well, the traffic was stopped.
Oh, it was at a standstill.
Yeah, it was a standstill.
So she was just like, oh, well, I'm at a standstill. I'm just going to
Yeah, so we weren't going anywhere.
pop my leg.
Yeah, so we had a conversation with her.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so that kind of relaunched my painting activities.
Yeah, just all
And I haven't stopped ever since.
all the hubbub and colors and people and craziness of Mexico City.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes that's what we need, to just get out of our comfort zone, go see something new, experience something different to kind of reignite that creativity.
Yeah, all kinds of interesting experiences that are inspirational to create.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we can move on to the Burner Botanical piece.
So this piece here, it's a combination of oil pastel and watercolor. And so one of the series that I've been doing for years is my firework series. And I love fireworks, and for me it's environmental artwork, and I like painting them. But because I was invited to have a show at the Burner Botanical Garden, I did this piece which combined my garden panorama series, which you have at the bottom, with the fireworks series. Yeah, so it kind of merges. Yeah. I had a show at the Burner Botanical Garden, 106 paintings.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so I did this piece for that show, since it was a combination, a celebration.
Yeah.
And then I did a painting similar and donated it to the Burner, and they for the big gala event for the opening of my show,
Mm-hmm.
and they auctioned it off, and someone bought it, and then we donated the money to the burner.
Oh, that's great.
So that was good.
Yeah. I love just the movement of the fireworks and all the color. This is also one of my favorites too. I like the vertical painting too, just the length of the piece, because it really allows you to see, you know, I think of like being on the ground looking up. You know, as a kid, I know when we used to go watch the fireworks at the lakefront, I would just lie on, you know, on my back on the blanket on the grass and kind of look up. And so it kind of invokes that nostalgia for me of being a little kid when I see this. Because, you know, you're underground, there's the flowers around you, and you look up and there's all these wonderful fireworks.
And so when I start this series, I start with a white piece of paper, watercolor paper, and I start with actually white oil pastels.
Okay.
So because the idea, when you see fireworks go up, you see the white light shoot up first, and then the burst of color.
Right.
So I tried to capture that idea.
What should we jump into next?
So this piece on the mantle here is from a series I called my Morph Dog series. And the Morph Dog is a small foam cube invented by a Russian artist. And when I first saw it, I thought, oh, I can use it like a rubber stamp. So I put the watercolor on the bottom of it, and then stamp it onto the artwork. So it's a Morph Dog. So
those are the little Morph Dogs running along the lower register here.
Yeah, and this one is called Dark Clouds Over Shaniqua, where I live in the village of Shaniqua. And so, and this one also is oil pastel with watercolor and the stamps, the stampings. And so the idea of this is all about, with the idea of the Morph Dogs, the idea of morphing, of constant change. And in our lives, when nothing ever stays the same.
Yeah, things are constantly evolving.
Right.
And
yeah, and the idea of hope, because dark clouds. So you know, the day starts out, it's overcast, it's cloudy, it's raining. You know, it's kind of miserable outside.
Sure.
But by the end of the day, the sun comes out, and so it's on the idea and theme of hope.
I like that.
Yeah, that's what that's all about.
Okay, I didn't know that. I never knew the story behind it. It's always fun, I think, to speak with any artist to hear, you know, what they were trying to convey and what they were thinking about. Because, of course, the viewer may always interpret it differently.
Yeah.
But now that you say it, I can see it, because, of course, you have the dark clouds on either side, but kind of coming through in the middle here is this rainbow of colors, and it's a little brighter, and you can kind of see these white patches in the background and a little bit of blue. So
yeah, exactly. You interpreted it perfectly. The dark clouds are separated by the rainbow.
That's why I'm an art historian.
Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, and in the lower left and right are the tops of the pine trees.
Yes.
And where I live in the village of Shaniqua, in Potawatomi, it means tall pines.
Oh, that's what it means. Okay. I knew it was a Native American word. I just, obviously, we have a lot here in the Midwest with all the different names of cities and towns and so on.
Yeah.
Very nice.
This piece here, when my wife and daughter and I were up in northern Wisconsin, up north of Minocqua, and I looked down at the ground, and there was birch bark on the ground, and birch trees don't live that long, maybe 65 years on average, and so there was birch bark on the ground, and I just picked some up spontaneously and started painting watercolors on it. And so I thought, well, Egyptians had their papyrus.
Well, they did.
Those of us in Wisconsin can have our birch bark.
Birch bark. And it's incredible, because I know birch bark can be very brittle and very fine. I mean, it can break apart really easily. And so the fact that it's retained the color and just the shape and everything is surprising to me.
Yeah, so the birch bark series is actually, I call it one of my 2 up north series. It's one of my favorite series that I do. And this one here, it's called Up North Series, Enter My TP Tattoo. So, it's just a playful piece. And again, showing, because it's on birch bark and the fact that Native Americans did things out of birch bark, including their canoes. And birch bark is, they made birch bark canoes because it's waterproof.
Yes.
And when I was working to paint on the birch bark, I realized that the outer surface of the bark is like paper, really.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking
and you can
of.
paint, you can do watercolor on that. But if you peel that off and you work on any of the inner layers, it's very resiny and it's waterproof.
Sure. So it's not going to allow
So
you
you
to
can't
use
you
it.
can't paint watercolor on the inner layers. If you want to do that, you have to use oil pastel or oil paint. But
That would make sense.
but anyway, so this friend of mine, she says to me, because I don't have any hair and I don't have any eyebrows or eyelashes, she said, you're not a bad-looking guy, but you'd look better if I took you to my tattoo parlor and he would tattoo some eyebrows and eyelashes on you. And I totally freaked out. And so this was what I did in response to that idea. Enter my TP tattoo. So I've got
that's what that is.
That's what that's all about. So you've got the TP
Yes.
with the
got
with the tattoos around it. You've got clouds with the tattoos around it, and you everything has the tattoos around it. So that was tattooed clouds. I mean, so
Okay, I gotcha.
so yeah.
Well, it's kind of an odd thing to tell you that you need to get those things tattooed.
Yeah.
I think you look perfect the way you are. You don't need to tattoo
Oh, thank
anything.
you. I appreciate it.
I know, it's true.
But I thought it made for a fun
It does.
inspiration
It does.
for an artwork.
Yeah. This is another Up North series.
This one is called.
Correct.
This is actually Southwest.
Oh, Southwest.
It's
pardon
called
me.
Purple Rain, Love the Earth. And so when we would go to Scottsdale with our daughter to visit her grandparents, who lived there in the winter for many years, when we were at the airport in Phoenix, I bought our daughter a rubber stamp kit of the Southwest Indian symbols.
Oh, okay.
And so, fitting in with my rubber stamp idea,
Sure.
Sarah and I made this mat by stamping the symbols on there. And this was also like an Indian headdress kind of thing.
Yeah, I can see that, the
idea
feather
of
headdress.
feathers. Yeah. And then, of course, Purple Rain, Love the Earth, I was influenced by the song
Oh, by Prince.
by Prince, Purple
Yeah.
Rain. I have another series called the Famous Artist Series,
Yes,
because we have
this is-
so many famous artist works in the gallery. There's a lot of material to draw from. But in this particular case, this was homage to Leonardo da Vinci, and I used to go back and forth on art buying trips to New York, dozens of times a year, and there was a place on 21st and 5th Avenue called Mo Ginsberg's. One of my favorite Italian brands of suits was called Leonardo. The label had Da Vinci's famous self-portrait on it. I couldn't throw that away and use that as a point of departure. So I was also doing a series of hybrid hibiscus flowers. And and Da Vinci, as we know, invented so many things, including aeronautical devices.
Yes.
So I just creatively made the hibiscus flower into a parachute. So it's
Oh,
Leonardo landing. I call it Leonardo landing in the Garden of Eden.
I knew it was a parachute like that, but I didn't realize. Okay, now I can see it.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew this part was a parachute, and then obviously that's part of the tag there. And that
Yeah, and
next to
it says in Italian, seal of quality.
Oh, okay.
So the second from last
Yes.
is
Boston Tea Party series.
the flying tea bags, which I call the Boston Tea Party series. And so how that came about was there was a shop in downtown Milwaukee on Jefferson Street called George Watts.
Yes.
They sold all the china and things like that. Crystal, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And
it's
so
beautiful,
they had
things.
there were about eight or nine big picture windows, display windows, and they asked 8 or 9 local artists to come up with an artwork inspired by what George Watts was selling.
Oh,
And
that's
so,
where it started.
so when I went in
that.
there to look around to get an inspiration, they had some hand-painted porcelain plates of George and Martha Washington.
Okay.
And because my birthday was on February 22nd, or it is, George Washington's birthday, I decided to use those plates because we were supposed to create a table setting for each picture window and then create an artwork to go with it.
Okay.
So that's how the Boston Tea Party, my satire on the Boston Tea Party that came about. And just coincidentally, George Watts' initials were G.W. and his wife's name was Martha.
Oh, how funny.
They had the same initials. So there was a duality there.
Yeah.
And so my satire on the history of the Boston Tea Party. Yeah.
I love that it's tied back to Watts Tea Rooms. That kind of played a big part in my upbringing too.
Great history there.
Yeah, there is, and
Yeah.
that's so cool that you got to be a part of it like that.
Yeah, my mother used to take me there for lunch too.
Yeah.
At Watts Tea Room. Yeah. And then, as Kyle pointed out, there's one more piece.
Yes, we do have one
Thanks,
more.
Kyle.
Another homage here, and that is to Vermeer.
So, when people come into the gallery, they'll say, well, who's your favorite artist? Or what's your favorite artwork? And I say, well, if you have enough time, I could list 500. But push comes to shove, if I could only choose one, it would be Vermeer and the Girl with Pearl Earring.
That's your favorite artwork. Okay.
If I could only choose one.
If you could only choose one.
That's what I would
Interesting.
choose, yeah. And so I made my interpretation of the Eiffel Tower into an easel and put her on
And put her.
portrait on the easel. And then here's a portrait, a self-portrait of Vermeer from a painting that he did. And then because from being Dutch, and you all remember the period in the 17th and 18th century when they used tulip bulbs as a medium of exchange. And so I've got the tulips and then Delft ware for Holland.
Sure.
And then because of the pearl earring, I've got the iridescent white pearlescent paint for the pearlescent stars in the sky.
Oh, how perfect.
So
So
that's-
everything kind of ties in,
Yeah.
represents that
So
beautiful
that's just
Dutch golden age.
a few of my artworks, and the rest you'll have to come in and
Yes,
see
you'll
in the
have to come
gallery,
here and see them personally.
or go online and
Or
see
go
them.
online to our website,
Yeah.
davidbarnettgallery.com.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, David, for sharing a little bit of your work and your history as an artist. This
Well,
was
thank
fun.
you for your art historical perspectives. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah.
And thank you to all of you for tuning in, and we will see you next time.